So let me just ask you a few questions just to get a sense of the audience. Is maximizing quality of hire important to this group? I'll say that again. This is actually the warm-up act, so it's just for the next session. Is maximizing quality of hire important? Okay, we're good. Now we're getting you warmed up here. Unfortunately, I think I'm cooling down here. What about measuring quality of hire? Does anybody know how to do it? I've been thinking about this for 20 years, so actually I'm kind of on a precipice here, because I'm going to say by, what time is it, 2:15? By 3:15, not only will you know how to maximize quality of hire, not only will you know how to measure it, but you'll also be able to quantify it. Now, if I pull that off, that would be a pretty good session, right? And if I don't pull it off, well, don't turn your feedback form in, all right? That would just be best if you don't do that. So that's what I really want to talk about. Did anybody, just by show of hands or by yelling out loud, did anybody get to that? Did the form download? Okay, so I'm going to go through some mathematics here, not heavy mathematics, but I want to ask a few questions as we begin. Question number one, is hiring talent at your company an investment or an expense? How many of you think it's an expense? How many of you think it's an investment? Okay, if it's an investment, how many of you are budgeted for recruiting activities? Budgeted. Then it's not an investment. How many of you determine the budget based on the ROI of improving quality of hire? Nobody. So there we have, that's the idea that I have, is that we all think it's an investment, but if you're budgeted for recruiting expense, it's really not an investment. Investment is going to cost more money. We got to put in a capital appropriation request. We got to justify it. So I just want to set the stage here that what we think we do and what we actually do are two different things. Now I want to ask a slightly different question. How many of you would like to raise and maximize quality of hire at your company? You guys got quiet all of a sudden. I think everybody does. So I'll assume that was a rhetorical question. But I want to ask you a question. For those people who are critical hiring decisions, where in fact you do want to raise the quality level of the people you hire, are you in a surplus of talent situation, meaning there's plenty of good people to choose from, or are you in a scarcity situation? How many of you have a surplus of great talent to choose from? For the guy on the mic, nobody raised their hand. How many of you are in a scarcity situation where the demand for talent is high? Everybody, not everybody raise their hand. Knock those people next to you who didn't raise their hand to raise their hand. Well, the point is, and I'll make this and I'm going to try to prove this, and I'm also talking slower than I normally talk because people are coming into the room here. I could actually get this hour presentation. Well, I'm from New York. I actually get an hour presentation done in about 12 minutes. So in Omaha, it takes about 2.5 hours. California, please, if you're from Omaha, don't. It was only a joke. It wasn't serious. So the idea that I want to do here is to suggest that if you want to raise the talent bar in a scarcity situation, you can't assume there's a surplus. And I'm going to suggest that most companies assume there's a surplus of talent and build their hiring processes fundamentally wrong. Let me kind of prove that, at least set the stage here. When you look at a company's hiring processes or the people that companies have hired, you can break it into three groups of people: the top third, the middle third, and the bottom third. Now, how many of you think all your people are exactly the same? Or is there really a difference between the top third, the middle third, and the bottom third? Just by show of hands, how many of you think there's a difference? Well, obviously we want to hire the top third. But I contend that most companies really go out of their way to hire people just like they've always hired. They clone their people. They have compensation budgets. Recruiters filter candidates on, can you fit within this compensation range? How many of you have managers that are disengaged? Now, nobody raised their hand, but it's all true. We all know that. So I make this statement, and I can look at how many of you post job descriptions that emphasize skills, experience, and academics. I can say right away, then you're obviously cloning people, because I would say the best people have different backgrounds. The best people have less skills. That's what makes them the best. They can do more with less experience. So if you're excluding those people, you're actually just maintaining the status level of your current hiring, and you want to do it cost efficiently and process efficiency. And what you also do is we sometimes hire the bottom third, but it's usually a mistake. Skilled person, underperformed, not motivated, doesn't fit the culture. So when you think about what companies do, they try to avoid mistakes and they try to efficiently hire people just like they've always hired. To hire the top third, you have to do different things, particularly if it's a surplus. And I will also say that 75 to 80% of the candidates in the top third are passive candidates. But you can't hire or even engage a passive candidate unless you understand the job, the opportunity for this person to grow and become something better. So there's a whole host of different things. What I want to do is suggest, let's go after the top third. That's what I want to talk about. Let's maximize it. Let's quantify it. Let's measure it. So that's what we're going here. And again, I have to pull this off, but you're not giving me the 10-minute warning, are you? No, I'm supposed to get a 10-minute. I didn't think I was up that fast. So now I'm going to go through slightly the mathematics, the ROI of quantifying quality of hire. Interestingly enough, in a normal distribution curve, the average of the top third is 15% above the mean. So a little bell curve. How many of you think getting people who are 15% better isn't that big a challenge? I mean, you could clearly see it, but how do you measure it and how do you do it? So those are challenges. So now I'm going to get a little bit mathematical here and financial. How many of you are in a public company? Well, its public company is, I think I got a, maybe I do, maybe I don't. Yes, well, maybe I do. The top line there is revenue per employee. That's public information if you're a public company. Exxon, 5.6 million per employee. Anybody here from ExxonMobil? Microsoft, $678,000 per employee. That's revenue per employee. Anybody here from Microsoft? Anybody here from Apple? $2.2 million per employee. That's revenue. GE, $477,000. Kraft, $810,000 per employee. For our sample LinkedIn average, it's $600,000 per employee. You can estimate, if you're a financial analyst, the variable margin for each incremental person you're going to hire. About 40%. If you want to understand how I estimated, if I had an intern go through it, we looked at a lot of different companies, about 40%, which says that for every person you hire on sample company, they should bring in $600,000 in revenue, $240,000 in profit. If you divide that profit by the average salary, in this sample, I'm saying it's $100,000, that's $2.40 per dollar of compensation. Now, this is where it gets interesting. I don't get much more math than that. If you hire 100 people next year, and how many of you are planning on hiring at least 100 people in 2015? So just about everybody. If you multiply just 100 people times 100,000 salary, that's $10 million in salary expense. If you're going to hire 1,000 people, that's $100 million. That's a lot of money. When you look at it in the totality of it, I don't think many companies and HR people realize how much money they're managing. That's a lot of money. The average in our sample company of just 100 people at 100,000 each is $24 million. $10 million times $2.40 per dollar of compensation. The top third just the top third, which isn't hard, will generate 15% more each year. $3.6 million more each year. And the top third will probably stay 4 to 5 years. If they stay 4 years, that's over $14 million in additional profit to your company per year, or over the 4 years. What's the ROI of that? It's the cost of hiring the top third. $14 million over the cost. For capital-intensive companies, where they got a lot of big equipment and machinery, 200 to 300%. For companies like Microsoft or Apple, where they don't have a lot of capital equipment, although the vendors do, it's 600 to 700%. The ROI is enormous in terms of raising the talent bar. And you have to convince management that it's worth spending possibly a little extra to get that. That's what the calculator does. It goes through and then you'll see on that link that I have, it actually has a link to a online calculator actually put some different assumptions in and different measures in. But nonetheless, I just want to set the stage here that we're talking enormous dollars. And it's not about cost and it's not about efficiency, it's about raising the talent bar. And if you continue to do exactly what you do, you're going to hire exactly the people you have, you're going to get exactly the results you have. And I believe that recruiters and recruiting leaders have an opportunity to strategically change the direction of the company, and they lose that opportunity because they don't know how to talk dollars. But to hire the top third is not a piece of cake. Number one, you need a different strategy. If they're passive candidates, you got to attract them. You can't filter them out. You have to have a different process. A truly passive candidate takes 6 or 7 steps before they'll get serious. Well, a recruiter has to know what those 6 or 7 steps are. If they're an active candidate, it's 1 step. By and large, if you're in a scarcity situation, you're going to have to shift most of your sourcing to passive candidates, not active candidates. You have to, when you get a candidate on the phone, you're going to have to conduct a needs analysis, not describe the job. Needs analysis is, hey, find out what this person needs in terms of a job or a career move. It requires fully engaged hiring managers. Managers don't hire in their image. Well, they do, but top people accept jobs from managers in their image. So if a manager isn't capable of attracting the top third, you're not going to attract the top third unless you intervene somehow. But yet, the impact of that is enormous. And you do have to track it in terms of metrics. And not efficiency metrics, but performance and quality metrics. Now, for years, people have been trying to get at quality of hire. And I think intuitively everybody knows these things, but if you don't have a way to do it, it's almost impossible to accomplish. Now, I have a serious issue here, and I need some help from the audience. Not the audience, from the staff, the LinkedIn staff. I need a chair up here. I forgot to tell you that. I need a chair, need it reasonably quickly. The reason I need a chair is I sometimes say things that are wild and crazy, so wild and crazy, I even have to sit down. I actually cannot believe I'm saying it. And this is not going to be strong enough. So if somebody could get me a chair, and I'm serious, I do need a chair. Because I'm about to say some stuff that will knock your socks off, so keep your shoes on, please. This isn't it, though. Thank you. That was pretty fast, I have to admit. That was, in practice, this took about 4 seconds, but it's just, thank you. No, I do appreciate that, thank you. Now, I just would say the first time I actually used the chair, I actually put it on a table here so people could really see it and almost fell off, but I will say something. Here's the idea. First I want to talk about, and I said earlier, if you're in a surplus situation, you have to rethink your strategy. And to hire the top third, it definitely takes a different type of strategy thinking. But when you think about hiring process, you can put every single decision you, the company, or the candidate makes, or the hiring manager makes, into one of 4 buckets. And we already defined there is a scarcity of great people. But one of the big buckets that everybody does is the having decision bucket. The having is what we traditionally put on job descriptions. What are you looking for? I need someone with an MBA, an engineering degree, 4 years of this industry background. We define a person. Well, as far as I'm concerned, most job descriptions are person descriptions. They're not job descriptions. A job is what people do, not what people have. But nonetheless, we filter, and their candidates on all their LinkedIn profiles, most of them, the things on LinkedIn and their resumes are all about what people have. And we mix and match having. Well, I'm going to make the statement that the top third will not have the skills that you want. What they have is something better, is they achieve results with less skills. That's what puts them in the top third. So right away, if you filter people on having, you're eliminating the top third. The second step, and our ATSs are designed this way too. LinkedIn is designed this way, which makes no sense to me, but it is. We then get a candidate on the phone. And the candidate and the recruiter, how many of you are run on recruit actually talk to candidates every day? It's a lot of you. We get on the phone and we got to filter candidate. He said, the candidate, you got an opportunity. The candidate says, well, tell me about the job. What do I get? What's the job, the company, location, compensation, the whole bit, the title. And then you, the recruiter, filter candidates out. What's your comp range? What's this? What's that? Do you want this title? So a lot of filtering goes on, first on the having, before you even talk to people. Then there's another whole dimension of filtering on what you get, and the candidate and the recruiter start filtering people out for the sake of efficiency. Because it's efficiency is your strategy, not maximize quality. And people make a lot of decisions before they even know what the job is. I mean, recruiters negotiate the job with a candidate before the candidate even knows what the job is or you know what the person is. I mean, that's kind of stupid. I mean, you think about it, why would you negotiate something? But you go into a store and buy a car, well, I'm going to spend this much money for the car, show me cars for that amount of money. But people do that in recruiting. We said, okay, let's put common sense in a parking lot and not use it. And it might work in a surplus situation, but it certainly doesn't work in a scarcity situation. It certainly doesn't work ever if you're trying to hire the top third. Because if you talk to someone in the top third, which is the other two buckets, and you ask them, why did you take a job with our company? They take it because of what they're going to do and become, not what they have. There's not one top third, I don't think there's even a bottom third person who says, I can't wait to get more experience doing the same boring stuff I've done for the last 10 years. But that's what you put in your job descriptions. We have a great boilerplate job, and here's all our employer branding, but the reality is you got to do the same job that you've always done for less pay than you're making, even though you're a great person. Now, most people don't think that way, but the logic is that's what we do. And at HR Tech last week in Vegas, how many of you were there? HR Tech in Vegas talked about how you could do that more efficiently. But when you think about it, ATS is designed, LinkedIn is designed, your process is designed, your comp people designed it, your OD people designed it, a left to right process, on the assumption there's a surplus of talent. Well, there's not a surplus of talent. There might be a surplus of people, but not of good people. If you want to raise the talent bar, you got to think backwards. You got to focus on what people can do and become, not what they have, and you, the recruiter, have to negotiate the getting. So when a candidate tells me, what do I get in terms of comp, I said, let's be real frank. If the job isn't a career move, it doesn't matter what you get. Let's have the discussion if it's a career move before we have a discussion on compensation. Well, and I make the contention that the person who talks to a candidate on the phone the first time, this amazing app and man, Apple came up with a great new iPhone 6. The best app for a recruiter is the phone part. You actually talk to people. I mean, it's amazing. It's actually call people up on the phone and tell them. But you have to understand that managers, when you do the intake meeting, are going to be focused on a job description list having. You got to get the manager off. Hey, no, let's talk about what the person needs to do. And the candidate's going to say, what do I get? And you say, no, let's talk about what you can become. That's a change in conversation. To hire the top third. Remember I said I'm going to maximize it, quantify it, and measure it. Well, part of it is you got to do it. Well, part of the thing you got to do is you got to get good candidates who are passive candidates to think about what they can do. And you got to get hiring managers to think about what they can do, which isn't always easy. And it starts with sourcing. So this is, excuse me, I'm choked up here. Actually, this chart does choke me up a lot because it's pretty profound, but thank you for the 6 people that understood that joke, but maybe I should sit down. That was actually, I didn't think that was one of the times I would sit down, but maybe I should repeat that. This is a foundational chart for recruiters, particularly if you want to go after passive candidates. This blue line represents the growth, learning, and satisfaction of every single candidate. That's not true. Of the candidate you're going to be talking with. And your job as a recruiter in 5 to 10 seconds to figure out where this person is on this chart. On the far left, candidates grow fast, high satisfaction, super passive. You ask them how satisfied they are. If they're looking, they're not looking. As growth slows down, they actually might explore. And if you're a recruiter, this is the question you should ask every single candidate you talk to. You will get a yes answer from even the super passives. Would you be open to explore a situation if it were clearly superior to what you're doing today? You will get 93.6% of the people say yes to that. Even people who are not looking. They'll at least say yes. Unfortunately, too many recruiters tell them about the job. This is where you conduct your needs analysis. You don't talk about the job, you understand why the person said yes to that question. Over time, that blue curve starts declining. When they start to decline, particularly the top third, we're talking about the top third here, people start looking out with their own network. They start talking to people whom they've worked with in the past. And if they're in the top third, they get a job pretty quickly. Most people who are tiptoes and explorers get jobs in the hidden market before they're publicized. Then we have the very active candidate. And if they're in a top third, they will find you somehow. But just to test to see if your sourcing is any good, from this moment forward, ask every candidate you talk to, regardless of where they are, the first time you talk to them, said, how long have you been looking? And if the candidate says, I've been looking for 3 or 4 weeks, and it took you 3 to 4 weeks to find them, your sourcing isn't any good. Pretty quick check to see if your sourcing is any good. If they said, I just started looking, I found your posting. Or I just talked to one of your employees, I just started looking, and one of my friends works at your company, suggested I give you a call. You probably got pretty good sourcing. Or I haven't started looking. The idea is if you go after well, let me just kind of give you, this was a research project we did with LinkedIn earlier this year. For all 22,000 people responded to the survey. 21% were super passive. These are people fully employed, over 3 years in the workforce. 21% super passive, 43% explorers, 13% tiptoers, 23% active. This is everybody. The top third, I'll show in a minute, slightly less active in the top third. However, if someone's super passive, the only way they take your job offer is if it's an extraordinary opportunity. Certainly not going to be a job description. Certainly the only way an explorer would take your job is if it was a significant career move, certainly not your job description. The only way a tiptoer would take your job is if it was a much better career move, certainly not a job description. The only way the top third of a very active candidate would take your job is if you had a great employer brand and the words sounded something important to them. This is why I suggest if you want to raise the talent bar and hire the top third and get a 200 to 700% ROI, you cannot just post jobs. What you have to do is develop what I call a full court sourcing press, 40-40-20 sourcing plan, 40% aggressive networking, 40% leveraging your employee referral program and doing Boolean search like Glenn talks about and sending compelling emails out, and 20% very compelling ads that can be found. I think on our website, louadlergroup.com, we have examples of all of those things you can use. But the idea when you get a candidate on the phone, you got to figure out where they are in that curve, and your job, and conduct needs analysis, your job as a recruiter is to push them over somewhere to the left, to either stop the decline or increase the slope of the curve. That's what you have to do for passive candidate recruiting. More importantly, if you want to go after the top third, only 5% of the top third are very active. So if you want to raise a talent bar, you got to say, hey, I can only spend 5, maybe 20% at most with a compelling ad, because even passive candidates will find your ad. 20% are explore or tiptoers, which means you have to leverage them through your employee referral program. 50% are explorers, 25% super passive. 70% of the market of the people you're going after are tiptoers or explorers. That's your sweet spot. You will not get them using boring job descriptions or a surplus of talent model. You have to use a scarcity of talent model, and your hiring managers have to be engaged. So let me kind of say, okay, now that's that aspect of it. But I want to ask you a few questions, so this is where I need some interactivity. Think about where you find your best candidates. How many of you think you find your best candidates through your followers or your job postings, your top third candidates? Show of hands, and loud. Louder. How many of you find them through contingency search firms or RPOs doing high volume hiring? How many of you find them through networking or referrals? One person? This was not a site-based quiz, this was a volume-based quiz. How many of you found them through networking or referrals? Thank God I had the chair, is all I can think of here. What about, and I think you would agree, you'd find them through top recruiters, sometimes executive search, at least you hope you do if you're paying a fee. I think you find a lot of your core talent through university hiring and internal promotions. And I think I would say to get tiptoers, I do a lot, and I still do search. We train companies how to do search. We get a lot through good Boolean search on LinkedIn Recruiter platform, and with compelling emails, follow up with the phone. So then if this is where you find the best people, don't you think you should spend your time the way to maximize those areas? That's the idea, is that, hey, you got to implement a 40-40-20 plan with maps to how you find great people. So to find the top third, even if we can quantify it and measure it, and I have to show you how to measure it, you have to do that. You have to actually do these things. The first thing you have to do is when you have the intake meeting, when you take the assignment. So this is a job description And I just found this on LinkedIn about 6 months ago. This was typical. I was just looking for, I just said systems engineers, Northern California. And I don't know if I can read this. I know you can't, but I'll try to do my best. But I got the screen here. It says, strong, let me see if this is a compelling job for a top third person who's not looking. Strong organizational and team management skills. Must be customer focused and have the ability to manage and resolve solutions to complex technical issues. Doesn't say what they are. Excellent oral and written communication skills, outstanding presentation and interpersonal skills. They said that twice. Ability to, it must be important, ability to interface with C-level officers, ability to multitask, experience in reviewing and providing feedback of this is the big thing, customer, doesn't matter. That's not a great job. And yet that's what companies post. This is a $175,000 job. And I imagine if that person's sitting in here, they're embarrassed, but so don't raise your hand, but they want to hire a top third person. And the manager wants to hire a top third person. They wouldn't even get a bottom third person with this. And in fact, if I took the job description, I'd say that's not a job description, it's a person description. I don't know if you saw a posting I did in LinkedIn Influencers last week where I said throw job descriptions like this in a wastebasket. Literally, I did throw it in a wastebasket. I don't know what compelled me to do it. I actually was with 12 managers there, and I threw it in a wastebasket, and I got their attention. I said, it's not a job description, that's a person description. A person has skills. I said, what does a person need to do? And I didn't show this little thing backwards, but I said, let's define the job before we define the person, which is kind of rational. Define the job. What do? They do stuff. And what could they become? What's the employee value proposition? Why would a great person who's not looking for a job want your job? Well, if you can't answer that question, you're not going to raise a talent bar. No, I didn't say that part to him. But that's logic. I'm a recruiter. All I do is help people or find candidates who want to do that work. And I find candidates in the top 10 to 15%. But if I don't know the job, at best I'm going to get, it's problematic. And what I do with the hiring manager, and this is where we start measuring quality of hire. How do you measure it? Well, I measure it by asking the manager, what would it take for this person to be in the top third? Not the quality of the person, the quality of the person's accomplishments. I'll say that again. I don't care about the quality of the person measuring quality of hire. I care about the quality of the person's accomplishments. Those accomplishments tell me if they're in the top third or not. So I said to the manager, what does this person need to do? Well, tell me, in general, this is the technical person who goes out with the sales team to present $50 to $100 million infrastructure products to our customers. This person's a technical liaison. I said, that's what a good person does. What does the top third do? Well, number one, they can get out there with the biggest clients in 3 to 6 months. Now, all of a sudden, I'm starting to get a sense of what the job is and what the top third do. What else do they do? Oh, they lead the intense product descriptions when they're sitting in a room with the chief technology officer, the procurement officer, the CFO. They're the one who everybody looks at when there's ever a technical requirement for the document. What does the best person do? Oh, they have this stuff inside out. They know it. They understand the implications. They can think broad-based. I now know what they have to do and what the top third has to do. It says they need good financial background. Oh, yeah, they're working with contracts. They got to figure out all the contractual and the cost estimating processes. So I went through it, and every single job in the world, what does multitasking look like? Oh, they got to be able to handle 3 to 6 projects and the 20 items within each project and never lose a moment in time. So they got to be on top of everything. I now know what the top third person has to do to be successful. So when a candidate asks me, tell me about the job, I understand what the job is. When I assess the candidate, I have to say, okay, are you a top third person? So this is where I really needed the chair. I'm going to do something that has never been done at any LinkedIn convention in 5 years. I'm going to interview every single person in this room on how I'd interview a candidate for that job. Never been done before. Now, I also say, I said the thing 5 years on purpose, because some of you have black badges because you've been here 5 years. I did not get a black badge, even though I have been here 5 years. So hopefully that would be enough influence that I somehow get one of those black badges that says a V, but that, as I say, has nothing to do with this workshop. It was just a total aside, but neither here nor there. Certain people value other things differently than others. So let me get back to the interview. So if I was to interview a candidate for this job, I'd start off by saying one of the things we have to do in this position is lead the technical discussions with our sales and marketing team when we're talking to our major clients around the world. Can you tell me about something you've accomplished that's most related to that? So that's the basis of the question. Obviously, you folks are not systems engineers in the telecommunications industry, so the example wouldn't work. So I'm going to give you something that will work for you that you can use. I'm going to just read some information off this card. I've written a book. Some of you probably have it. It's called The Essential Guide for Hiring and Getting Hired. I also wrote a book called Hire with Your Head. And I've summarized the whole book on this little card, which is actually quite depressing when you think about it. Because I give the cards away and Amazon charges the book, but neither here nor there. A version of that same question, which is the one I'm going to use with you, is, let's assume I'm interviewing you, you're coming into my office, 15 minutes, and I say, I want to know about your most significant career accomplishment, a career-defining moment, that if I spend 10 or 15 minutes with you understanding that totally, I'd know what you bring to the table. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to think about interviewing approximately 600 people in this room at the same time, which is really why I need the chair. That is that's a remarkable feat. You would agree, right? And I would not try this at home until you practice. But what I'm going to do is I'd like you to pull this off. You have to actually think about what would you talk about. Assuming we actually had a 15-minute interview, what would you think is your most career-defining moment? The biggest thing you've ever done, that if someone really spent the time understanding it, they'd have a good sense of what you bring to the table. What I'd like you to do is put that thought in your mind of what the accomplishment is. Take 15 seconds to think about it. You might want to write it down. What would you talk about for 15 minutes? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start preparing to interview everyone and ask you a series of questions. So we could have total silence would be great. Okay. Not yet. Okay. When I'm done. Thank you. Okay, so let's do this. You come into my office. Now, don't write anything down. I have the questions I'm about to ask you, I'm going to hand you a card just like this in a moment. So think about, for this experiment, so I call it the virtual interview, just think about how would you answer it. It's not going to take 15 minutes, take 2 minutes to go through it. But I just want you to kind of imagine this scenario. You come into my office, or the recruiter's office, and the recruiter says, tell me about your most significant accomplishment, a career-defining event. And you spend a minute, most people spend a minute and a half describing it. So then I go through a few more questions. First off, describe, when you first got this opportunity, describe the opportunity or the challenge you were faced and highlight the 2 or 3 biggest challenges. Why did you get this job? Did you volunteer for it? And if you volunteered, why did you volunteer? And if you were chosen for it, why did somebody select you to do this work? Okay, great. Give me a snapshot of what the circumstances were like when you first took on this role. And by the way, when did this actually happen? What was the date, the month, and how long ago? And how long did it take to complete? Let's go fast forward to the end of this. What did you actually accomplish? If I could take a tour, or give me a snapshot of the beginning and a snapshot of the end, just so I can see what you actually accomplished. What were the 2 or 3 biggest challenges you faced when you first took on, or maybe they came up along the way? Just 2 or 3. Give me the highlights. What was the environment like? The pace, the resources, your boss, the circumstances, the culture of the company. Is this something you liked, or is this something you had to survive in? What kind of skills did you use? Assume you had some skills in this job. How did you apply those skills on the job? Did you learn any new skills? How did you apply those on the job? And how did you learn them? What was the biggest change you had to make? Walk me through how you made the change and how you influenced people to make that change. What motivated you there? Give me some examples of where you went the extra mile. When you went the extra mile, what did you like about doing it? Did you ever go the extra mile on things that you didn't really care about? Where you just put it through because you knew it was important? What was your biggest success? Single biggest success there. What was your biggest failure? Single biggest failure that you probably learned a lot from. I assume you put a plan together. How did you put the plan together? How did you get the plan approved? How did you manage to the plan? By the way, did you make the plan? Was there any part of the plan that you had difficulty, you had to overcome some challenges to actually make? What was the single biggest problem you faced there? Walk me through how you resolved it. And in retrospect, was it the right way? What was the single biggest decision you had to make? Walk me through how you made it. And was it the right decision now if you think about it? If you could start over again and do it now, what would you do differently? What would you do differently? We're getting close to the end here. Now I'm meeting you now on October 20th, 2014. This happened X number of years ago. Are you a different person as a result of this? How'd you change? How'd you grow? This whole accomplishment. Oh, we just have 30 seconds left. Let me ask you one more question. What did you like most? What did you like least, but you still gutted it out? Oh, wait, I forgot. I have one more question. That's a pretty significant accomplishment. What kind of recognition did you receive for it? And in your mind, was that recognition justified given the work you did? Hey, thank you very much. I appreciate that. And you walk out the door. Do you think I'd learn anything about you in that 15 minutes? By show of hands or loudness. Thank you. I learned some people are tenacious, some people are problem solvers, some people are team players, some people are good influencers, some people are technically competent, some people are will never let anything fall apart. Some people develop other people. Whatever it is, I'm learning behavior, skills, and competencies. I did not ask a single behavior, skill, or competency-based question. I said, tell me about your biggest accomplishment. And you need behavior, skills, and accomplishments to do any accomplishment. That's why I don't like traditional behavioral interviewing, because it's about one thing. But I need to tie that accomplishment to my job. Everybody's motivated in some way, but are you motivated to do my work? So now I can say, hey, interesting accomplishment. We need to lead a team to present to senior level officers at major companies to sell $50 million infrastructure products. Tell me about a major accomplishment there, and do the same thing. So the idea is, I ask the same question over time for different job-related accomplishments, different team accomplishments, and different... Oops. We would have to end this program. Probably a good idea, some of you, right? But nonetheless, I would just talk like this. I'm sorry. I actually, if you can't believe this, I did go to my 50th high school reunion. I'm the oldest person in this room. 50th high school reunion last week on Long Island, and we were just as immature as we were today as we were 50 years ago. It doesn't change as you get older. You creak a little bit as you do it, but you still do it. Nonetheless, what I do is I ask this question over and over again to get a track record of individual accomplishments, a track record of team accomplishments. I even look at the growth of your teams. And then I put all of that information together in a quality of hire scorecard, which I'll show you in a moment. But let me ask you this. Would any of you like one of these cards which measure quality of hire? Okay, let's go. I have the ACE LinkedIn team pulling this off. Some of the people in the LinkedIn team are delegating this task to the people at the end of the row, which are the team-oriented people. Some of them are doing it themselves, which are the individual contributors, which is another technique which they didn't realize I was assessing here. So let's take 1 minute, take a look at that card, and then I want to show you how you take that information and evaluate quality of hire. They're short too. There's plenty of them. They'll show up. I guarantee. Well, here's, if you're short two, I have two here, but I know there's hundreds in the back. That was good. Okay, does everybody have one? We're not going to save that. Now, I'll give you a story. Actually, no, I won't give you a story. I presented that card to a training group at some company, and 5 years later, I meet the same person who I didn't know was there. He actually had that card in his pocket. He still used it. So that actually goes into individual accomplishments, how to define the job, how to make the assessment, at least if you go through this. So now I've said the way I'm going to measure quality of hire, at least conceptually, is compare what I need done, which I've defined as the top third. I'm going to compare what the candidate has done in comparison to that. Then I'm going to rank the candidate. I have what's called a general formula for hiring success. I'm basically giving you folks a free competency model that companies have paid $250,000 to define. Little do every companies know is that every competency model is the same. And are all incorrect. Reason is competencies don't determine success. Competencies in a specific situation predict success. So let me just real quickly go through it. If the hiring formula basically says the top line is the ability to do the work, which is talent management, team, and thinking skills, and I get all of that from that little question, in relationship to the actual job, in relationship to the actual manager, and in relationship to the actual culture. Good people don't underperform. That's not really, the reason good people underperform is usually not because of lack of technical ability. It's because the circumstances weren't they were told, you didn't tell them what the job was, or they don't like their manager. Well, I calculate all of these things in our scorecard. So we have a scorecard, which on that form that I asked you to download, the front half of the form goes through the methodology to calculate the ROI of improving quality of hire. The back of it has a copy of the scorecard. Quickly on the scorecard, I don't want to get into the super details of it, but the column in the far most left basically is divided into three components. Number one, the basic skills to do the work. Skills, experience, what we call the achiever pattern. We look for an achiever pattern. Is this person in the top quartile of their peer group? If they're in the top quartile of their peer group, and we have methodologies in our questioning to determine is this person worth conducting an in-depth interview. So on our screen, we figure out is this person an achiever? In the phone screen, we quickly figure does this person have the technical capability to do the work, the managerial capability to do the work, even managing him or herself? Do they have the team skills to do the work, and do they have the problem solving and thinking skills? And we relate all of that stuff in relation to the actual job, which in this case was what does the person need to do to be successful? Then part of the assessment is their success comparable to what we need done in our environment? If you've got a micromanager and this person doesn't like micromanagers, he or she will be a failure. Regardless, there's ways to figure out cultural fit, managerial fit, job fit. Collectively, that drives motivation. You can be the most highly motivated person in the world, but if you've got a bad manager, you're not going to be too effective. So we want to capture all of that. We measure all of those factors in relationship to the job using that one question interview that I just talked about. And we rank the candidate on a scale of 1 to 5. 1 is a person in the bottom third. A 0 means they should never have been interviewed. The bottom third, they just barely, but they don't fit. A level 2 is in the middle third. 2.5 is average. It's the existing average of people in your company. And it's always in comparison to the job that you defined in the intake meeting. A level 3 is, if somebody gets a level 3 in all of those, they're in the top 20, 25%. A great hire. Level 4 does more, does it better, does it faster. Top 10%. And it's based on evidence, not feelings or emotions. It's based on evidence. When the hiring team gets together and we argue and yell and scream at each other. And we get consensus, but that's how we measure pre-hire quality of hire. A 5 is a rock star, MVP. The way I look at it from a sports analogy is a level 3 is always going to be a starter on your team. Level 4 is going to be on the MVP. Level 5 is going to be, level 4 will be all-stars, level 5 will be the MVP. You want to hire, and we tell managers, you're going to hire level 3, 4, or 5. When I take the assignments, if I can find someone who can do this work, you'll hire the person. So I've made the managers shift to think about who they're going to hire. I measure quality of hire during the hiring session. And then 3 months, 6 months, a year later, I can use the same scorecard and see how did the candidate do in comparison to their predictable hires. The first time I went public with this was in October of 2008. If you remember, October of 2008 was 6 years ago. 2 people running for president. I won't tell you who their names are, you probably know. I ranked them both on this scorecard. At the end of it, I ranked them both, and I'm going to tell you what the score, you can probably find it on ERE. I said, no one I've ever placed in that my recruiting, which I had been recruiting for 35 years in, ever got a score this low. That's what I said. And you look at the performance, it was exactly what was predicted. I'm not going to get into politics of it, and I got a lot of heat for that because people said, get out of politics. I just really wanted to demonstrate that you could actually measure quality of hire. And literally, I've never placed anybody who had that lowest score on either of them because it's proven results, not anticipated results. Neither here nor there, you can compare pre and post quality of hire using this methodology. However, then you have to take all of this information, pre and post quality of hire, extra, maybe a salary premium to hire a person, maybe not, extra recruiters to do the work. You got to buy LinkedIn Recruiter, more seats for LinkedIn Recruiter, which I know they'll like. You have to get them trained. I would like to train them in performance-based hiring, but that's not necessary. And you put them through the calculator. The reason I show you that Rockwell calculator, anybody know that Rockwell is one of the first companies ever made a handheld calculator? I worked at that company at that time. That chip is an 8K chip in that calculator. The first chip in the world that could actually divide. Our 4K chip could only add, subtract, and multiply. We thought the world was changing. We got to divide in a handheld calculator. And it was pretty cool. And this one's got what? Anybody know what is it? The chip in here, the RAM chip? It doesn't matter. It's a heck of a lot bigger than that one. But it was kind of interesting that we did. I actually have a calculator like that. My mother-in-law had. So, but you put it in. That's all you need is to be able to add, subtract, and multiply and divide to calculate the ROI. That's probably too advanced. You don't need a phone to do that either. Or maybe you can call somebody up and how you do this. But now that Bud URL is a little different. That actually gets you to the spreadsheet that actually allows you to do the calculations. You might want to write it down. Bud URL ROI Calc. The other one was this form, the paper-based sheet. This one's actually a online model you can use to calculate it. And you can just play with the assumptions. What do you pay extra? How many recruiters you need? So you can play with all the assumptions. So I don't know if it's neat or not. But let's say this. So the idea is we want to raise quality of hire. And I said at the beginning, about how many minutes ago, whatever it was, 50 minutes or so ago, that we could maximize quality of hire, we could measure quality of hire, and we could quantify it. To pull it off, though, you have to think differently. You have to recognize that hiring people in the top third, particularly if they're more passive candidates, you can't assume there's the same process that they're an active candidate. It's a totally different process. You need more recruiters and trained recruiters and engaged hiring managers. You do have to think backwards. You have to emphasize what people can do and become, not what they have and they get. And I'm going to suggest your ATS, your whole business processes are designed left to right. To hire the top third, you got to go right to left. Of all the things I say, that's hard to do because you're breaking conventional wisdom. And I'm going to say, hey, even if you understand it, that's not insignificant. You got to get a lot of people on board to do that. To pull it off, you got to either raise the bridge, meaning, hey, if you want the top third, you got to pay them more, or you got to lower the water. Hire people who have less skills but have more potential. I would rather lower the bridge, lower the water. It starts by defining the work itself. What would this person need to accomplish over the course of a year where you would agree this person's a top third person? That at least starts the methodology. You got to then, when you talk to passive candidates, you got to implement what I'll call a 40-40-20 sourcing plan, going after the sweet spot, which explorers or tiptoers, conduct the needs analysis the moment you get the person on the phone. The moment you get the person on the phone. You're going to get those people largely through networking, referrals, maximize your employee referral program using, and let me tell you, LinkedIn Recruiter has plenty of boolean. You don't have to be an expert to do it. You just have to be pretty good at it, but you have to get these people on the phone and and I'll call it the dance. You got to get them off the idea of what they get versus focus on what they do. And that does take some finesse as a recruiter, but the information is there. Then you got to assess their capabilities. Walk through their accomplishments over 3 or 4 or 5 years and start seeing a growth of the person's accomplishments. Person is a good fit if you see a growth of accomplishments and the work they've done is comparable to the work you need done in your environment, in your circumstances with your manager. You put all that together, you'll actually be able to hire the top third. And there is an impact. It is a 300 to 500, 600, 7% impact. It could even be higher than that. The first year, you obviously have costs of recruiters, but once you hire them, there's no, or they're already hired. They just take your companies to a new level. So let me kind of just end it. I'll certainly open it up for questions. If we have any questions at all, and hopefully we have 10, because if you have a good question, I will give you a copy of my book. If it's a really good question, I'll sign it. If it's a bad question, I'll give you the book, but you got to pay for it. So hopefully you have some questions here, because this is how I drive sales. And if it's a stupid question, if you don't get a book, you know it's a stupid question. So let's just leave it at that. I hope I didn't intimidate anybody, but you might want to start lining up here. She's just telling me it's 10 minutes. That was very well done. I appreciate that. No, I do appreciate that. Now somebody's come up with 5 minutes here. I'm kibitzing too much. So here's the idea. Performance-based hiring is a system designed to hire the top third. 4 steps. You got to define the work. You got to go after people who are passive candidates. You got to be a better interviewer than your hiring manager, and you got to close the deal without any money. And you can actually do that if it's a career move. At least you can help. But you can never do it if you don't know the job. By conducting a needs analysis, I know where the candidate is short, and I say, well, I think this is a good job. Here's where you're going to grow and develop. But you can't do that. And I look at the interview as really a gap analysis between what the candidate has done and what you need done. That becomes a career move. That's what I close on. Not on money, I close on growth. And if a candidate says, what's the money? A week before the close, I say, before we even get into the negotiation on dollars, is this a job you want? Because if it's not a job you want, let's pass. And then I have to tell me why you think this is a career move. And I will not go further until that candidate can tell me why he or she wants as a career move. Because I know the candidate's not only going to sell me, they got to sell their friends, families, associates, spouse, everybody else. So the close is not you. It's getting the candidate to sell you, not you sell the candidate. That's the secret of recruiting. Get the candidate to sell you. Now, that's easy with an active candidate. Not so easy with a tiptoe or explorer. Get the candidate to sell you, don't you sell the candidate. You pull that off, you're in the game. So what I open up for questions. We are working with a number of companies. I'm meeting them throughout this, I guess that does struggle. Meeting with them out the conference to see if they want to be involved in a small proof of concept to really put the numbers together at their companies to see what the ROI is of raising the talent bar. So let me open it up for questions. If you want to reach me, Lou at louadlergroup.com. Other than that, any questions? But to do a question, you have to go to the mic because the guy who's in charge of producing this really lambasted, well, he didn't lambaste me. John was here, he lambasted John, but I took the brunt of it by saying you got to get people to talk to the mic. So where are the mics? I don't even see them. Okay, that was a question. No, where's the mic was a question. So you got to go to the mic. I know it's uncomfortable, but do it. It's worth it. It's a good question. Show somebody where the mic is. It's down that aisleway. I know I saw him here. Where's the mic? Come on,
right here.
Raise your hand. Okay. Oh, there it is, way down. Okay, we got a question. Yes.
All right. Lou, I really liked the way that you framed the first question that you ask a candidate. I love that. In the terms of needs analysis, when you're trying to get to understand where the candidate's coming from, do you have a similar kind of first question that you frame everything around?
Yes, I do. So here's my question when I talk to a lot of passive candidates. In all of my years of recruiting, I don't think I ever placed an active candidate. The question I ask right away is, would you be open to explore a situation if it were clearly superior to what you're doing today? When I started as a recruiter, we literally spent about a month figuring out what question could we ask to somebody who's not looking to get a yes. That was it. We got 93% yeses. However, most recruiters then say, great, let me tell you about what I've got. You can't tell the person about the job. So what I do say is, great, let's review your LinkedIn profile. I'll then give you it will take 2 or 3 minutes. I'll then give you a quick overview of the job I have, and we'll see if it's a career move. The point of that is I have 5 minutes. That person's given me permission to ask questions for 5 minutes because they said yes. Too many recruiters go into the sell mode. I conduct a needs analysis. I figure out where they are on that curve. I go through that. I know that I've got 5 minutes, and I will make this statement that whoever talks to the candidate the first time, particularly passive, is the key to hiring great people. That is the most important point, is that first 5-minute call. If you get that right, even if the candidate's not qualified, you can network with that person, and LinkedIn Recruiter allows you to search on their connections. So it's a game changer. That's where LinkedIn is a game changer, but it takes a good sourcer or the first recruiter to make that phone call. We can kind of talk about that. That's the one I spend 2 hours on. How do you handle that 5 minutes in our training? Yeah, next, there's another person who's got a question. Tell us who you are, too, if you got a question.
My name is Jeff Fleming. I'm with Civic Plus out in Kansas. We've been using...
I hope you weren't offended when I said Omaha, were you?
No.
You
Not
should have been,
enough.
but that's okay. But it's no, go on, I'm sorry.
But we've used performance-based hiring since I've been there. I've been there since November of last year, and it's done wonders to improve the quality of hires at the organization.
Well, you can get up here and say that. You don't have to be back there. Come on.
One thing that is a little bit of a challenge, though, is when it comes to more entry-level candidates that may not have suitable accomplishments to assess if you're going to use that as the sole basis for hiring them. How do you normally address that with entry-level candidates where you need to focus more on aptitude sometimes?
Well, I guess I wouldn't say it's the sole base. I wouldn't probably use it as the sole base. It's the core. But we did some work with the YMCA helping them hire 16-year-old camp counselors. About 10 years ago, they had to hire 100,000 counselors. We just asked those managers, what do the best people do? Well, the best camp counselors who were 16 proactively helped other people. They best also planned, for the YMCA camp counselors, they didn't react to the day's events, they planned them the night before. So our process would be is if I was hiring an entry-level person, benchmark top performers who are entry-level and find out what they do differently. Young people have accomplishments. Engineers are part of multi-team projects. They do work outside of it. They earn part of their degree. So I still look for what I call that achiever pattern, which puts them in the top 25% of their peer group. And in the case of camp counselors, it's doing their planning activity before they do it, and involving themselves in community activities and giving back to the community. So we still look for those traits and behaviors that would indicate their top third, but it probably isn't directly related to the job. So from that, I'm still looking for someone who's someone who wants to become better than what they are.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Any more questions? I know there's somebody over here. I have time for 2 more questions.
My name is Maya. I'm with NanoString Technologies, and I have hormonal anxiety around this stuff. I guess I'm thinking about the opposite situation. With all the changes in the marketplace, it seems like a lot of people have changed where they fit in an organization. They've kind of zigzagged their career. And so how do you use this type of approach with that person that's been up here, been down, been up?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I guess I would be very concerned if it's up and down. Let's assume that the person is up and down with legitimate excuses. What I would want to do then is find out what motivates this person to excel and what circumstances was the person excelling, and are those circumstances consistent with what I need done. So I would do that, and if I could say, okay, this person has an up and down career, but in these 3 instances over the last 10 years, the person really was a top performer. I believe because our situation duplicates that, there'll be a top performer in our organization as well. So I'd really, number one, I'd be cautious of that, find out why they left, why they took the job, did they get it. But if I could find a pattern that made logical sense and our job mapped to what their peak performance was, I'd say this person's probably worth the probability of making a shot at the person. So that's how I would handle that. Any more questions? If not, guys, oh wait, one more, okay.
Hi, Lou. Lisa Young, Bell Helicopter, Dallas, Texas. Is this applicable to internal ready successors and evaluating in your succession planning? How do you use performance-based hiring in that situation?
If this was a group of 5 people, I would throw that back to you and say, what do you think? But it's not a group of 5 people, it's a group of 500, now 494. Thank you. The front row is actually getting pretty good here. You'll get it in about 30 seconds, so it's a... No, what I would do is, yes, I think from an internal move, particularly, now if you know somebody, it's different than if you don't know somebody. So I would still want to look, again, my whole focus is the person's, and I'm not, let me restate that. I'm less concerned with the quality of the person and more concerned with the quality of the person's results in the environment in which they took place. So I'd say, yes, if I'm going to move somebody internally, does this person have the capability to do the work? Are they in a trend that would go up? I didn't give you the second question, which really gets at potential. And I won't give it to you now, but it really gets at thinking skills, and by changing the quality of the question, you can actually determine this person's current capability to do the work. I didn't get into that, but yes, it certainly would work for internal promotions, internal visibility. So the answer would be yes. If you want to talk afterwards, I'll show you a little more specifically how it's done. Regardless, though, thanks very much, everybody. I hope you go out and raise the talent bar. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.